most powerful head coaches in college football. I'm going to give you the criteria right off the top, and I know this is going to be ignored by like 80% of the folks in the comment section. When I ask who the most powerful coaches in college football are, I'm talking about everything from resume to reputation. How much does their voice resonate? How much does their voice move the needle? I want to know what kind of vision they have. Do they see around the corner? And I also want to know how much they are respected and or just outright feared. With all of those thrown into the blender, who are the 5 most powerful coaches in college football? Number 1's pretty easy. That's Nick Saban. This won't change. In fact, I would argue it'll be several years after Saban's retirement before he's not the most powerful voice in the sport. I don't know how long that will be, and I don't know how long from now that will be. But Nick Saban has the best resume in the sports history. He is excellent in terms of track record of being able to have an idea on things and being able to kind of see around the proverbial corner on things. But also, everything he says moves the needle. We're a media company, and so we get to see the data and the analytics behind the scenes of what happens if you put a name in a headline, or if somebody says something relative to someone else saying that same thing. Which person, when they made the quote, moved the national needle more? No one does it more than Nick Saban. He can give a recipe of his for brownies. It moves the needle. People click on it. It's pretty crazy to see, actually. We could abuse that if we wanted to. Some of you think I talk Saban and Alabama too much on the show, even though you would do the same if it were your show. But we could really abuse it if we wanted to and just put him in every headline. It would be a sound business strategy. It's not quite the direction we're going to go on the show. All right, so number 1's easy. Here's where it gets a little murky. Who's the number 2 most powerful head coach in the sport? I flip-flopped this, I think, 4 times today. Right now, I'm going to go with Dabo Swinney as the number 2 most powerful coach in college football. I flip-flopped it with Kirby, by the way. That was the guy that I was strongly contemplating putting number 2. Dabo Swinney is the guy, speaking historically, that will be looked at as the one who took not 1, but 2 bites out of Bama at the peak of their dynasty. However long it lasts, you will always have that 16 season and that 18 season where they blew Bama out in Santa Clara. You'll have that. You'll also have the story that Dabo built his program in many ways in a diametrically opposed fashion to the way Saban built Alabama, which the lesson to me was, well, there's just more than one way to skin the cat. A lot of folks tried to turn it into the good versus evil, the right way versus the wrong way. It's just 2 different ways, man. They both worked. They were dominating the sport for an extended period of time. It's not like they've gone anywhere. But the other parts of this that matter to me when we're talking about most powerful coaches is Dabo Swinney has kind of become a national voice. You know, there's a thing that we focus on a lot of times in the SEO world, the search engine optimization world. We call them one-namers. Coaches or public figures who have ascended to such a level that you no longer have to use their first and last name. When you just say a name, Saban, Dabo, Kirby, Jimbo, it'll click. People know who you're talking about. When you speak about Dabo Swinney in conversation, you don't say Coach Swinney, Dabo Swinney, no first and last name needed. It's just Dabo. Okay, that shows you that you've been around for a while, you're established, everyone's got an opinion on you. Whether you like him or not, that's kind of irrelevant to the point I'm making here. But the other thing is he does not hesitate, he being Dabo Swinney, to lean into going on the record about big picture issues. But at the same time, he's not a carnival barker. He doesn't talk just to hear his own mouth run. Even if you agree or disagree, you need to understand that if you live in Amarillo, Texas, and Dabo Swinney says something, you stop to listen. If you see a headline that says Dabo Swinney speaks out on fill in the blank subject or topic, you're going to click on it. I know you do. I see the numbers. So Dabo Swinney is there at number 2. Now, here's the thing. We don't know what the future holds, so this could be where Dabo Swinney peaks. Or imagine this. Imagine it's 2025. Nick Saban has retired from college football. Dabo Swinney has righted the ship. He has moved on in the post-Venables, post-Tony Elliott era. He's gotten himself some new coordinators from in-house. He's reestablished Clemson as a dominant force on the Atlantic coast, and they're right back in the national championship picture every year. In a post-Saban world, for all we know, Dabo could ascend to number 1 one day in these rankings. So it's a very much remains to be seen thing, but right now I got Dabo at number 2. The number 3 most powerful head coach in college football to me, and rapidly rising, is Kirby Smart. The immediate pushback when I texted some folks about this and said, I think I got Kirby at number 2 or number 3 today was, Well, he's still kind of young. But is he? First off, he's a special case, just outright, because he's been on the national radar for so long, even before he was a head coach. He was the highest profile coordinator in college football because he was the defensive coordinator for Nick Saban inside the best program in the sport. And so you already knew him. Everyone already knew him before he became a head coach. But even if you're just judging head coaches here, which we are, guys, he's entering his 7th year. So he's a lot closer to being a decade in than he is to his infancy. He just won a national championship. They have become a model superpower program in the recruiting game. I think Kirby Smart has elevated Georgia from a regional brand to a national brand. Now, back home, a lot of my friends in Georgia, they thought Georgia already was a national brand. It wasn't. It was a regional brand. It has elevated to being a national brand. And there is no easy way to do that. You've got to matter, and you got to matter for quite a while, and you have to emphatically matter. People can no longer choose to ignore you. They can't ignore Georgia anymore. Under Kirby, they haven't been able to for a while. I think in some people's minds, he needed the championship win to validate himself in their minds, I want to stress again, not mine, as one of the best in the game. He already was that. But I'll tell you what that championship win did. I think it gave him a much bigger platform. There was a lot more visibility, maybe from the casual and sub-casual crowd that only watches, the big games and the championship games. They didn't know Kirby Smart like we knew him. Well, now everyone knows him. But I'll tell you what else is happening. Did you notice when Saban and Jimbo had their little spat, did you notice who the media ran to get a comment? It was that guy. It was Kirby Smart. That is, next to Nick Saban, the biggest voice in the SEC, and the SEC is the predominant conference of college football right now. They know. They're not stupid. They see the same numbers we do. They know what words out of Kirby Smart's mouth mean in that game. But the other part is, and he's only started to do this recently, is much like Dabo, much like Nick Saban, he started to speak out on some bigger picture issues. I've spoken several times on the show. I'll mention it briefly again. The day after they won the championship, he's still up there in Indianapolis. Reese Davis of ESPN sits down with him, and he has all the freedom in the world just to tout his program endlessly and use that time to be a recruiting and marketing tool. And instead, he took some time and he said, I don't like the direction of the sport right now. I do not like the way the calendar works. I got assistants. And he didn't use these words directly, but here's what he meant. I got assistants having to recruit 4 classes simultaneously, and a lot of folks think just because they make a big paycheck relative to the paycheck a normal 9-to-5-er makes in the real world, it justifies having to work the way they work. There's a certain maximum capacity that folks are capable of, no matter if you pay them $1 billion a year. And right now in college football, we got good guys leaving the game because they have surpassed their maximum capacity. We need to do something about it. Well, as soon as he said that, I can tell you, we talked about it on this show, but behind the scenes, a lot of people started talking about him. That is an indicator of a guy who's got a little more power and a little more stroke than just your average coach, or even just your average coach who's winning games. Winning games is one thing, but then having the voice that resonates, that's another thing. Kirby Smart's got both of them now. All right. Now, let's get really particular with, again, the criteria. It's more than just your resume and record. We are talking about a number of things here in terms of most powerful coaches in college football. And with that in mind, my number 4 most powerful head coach in college football is Lincoln Riley at USC. Get used to saying that because it's still pretty new as it rolls off the tongue. I think this is very much in a state of flux, on the upswing, of course, for Lincoln Riley. But I think that in many cases, Lincoln Riley serves as the face of the next chapter of college football, if you understand what I'm saying there. A lot of the stuff we talk about here, whether it's the portal, whether it's NIL, whether it's what's going to happen on the West Coast, when's the Pac-12 going to be back, how long's USC going to be dormant as a superpower, well, this dude has either something or everything to say about all those subjects. This is, again, a guy that's pretty polarizing. No one's indifferent on him, which usually means you matter. It always means you matter. And the second thing is, when it comes to resume, I have no clue why people knock him. He's 55-10 as a head coach. He won back-to-back conference titles at Oklahoma, went to the playoff 3 times. The pushback on Lincoln Riley is, well, he didn't win in the playoff. Okay. Well, did you see who I had listed above him? They're there for a reason. But outside of that, Who's doing it better than Lincoln Riley over that stretch? And now he picked up, even though he was already at one of the premier programs in America, he picked up, here's the insertion, whether you like it or not, and he went to USC. And now here's what's really going to rub some folks the wrong way. Whether you like it or not, Lincoln Riley's voice is the voice of Pac-12 football. He speaks for the West Coast. You don't agree with that in Salt Lake City or Eugene, Oregon. I know you don't. I wouldn't either. I am not speaking on behalf of you guys. I'm talking about everyone east of the Rocky Mountains. Everyone east of the Rockies looks at Lincoln Riley and he speaks for the West Coast as far as they're concerned. As far as someone in Milledgeville, Georgia is concerned, Lincoln Riley speaks for not only USC, but the Pac-12 and the West Coast. Well, that's a big burden to have on your shoulders, but it's also a big responsibility, and it stands to reason if that's how people view you, then you're pretty powerful and only growing more powerful. Now, that's before he has, quote unquote, resurrected USC. Imagine if all of a sudden, not in year 2 or year 3, but in year 1, they win the Pac-12. So you would safely assume that's a little bit ahead of schedule. And then they just start rattling off playoff caliber season after playoff caliber season. They continue to own the portal. They continue to not have to rely on the portal so much because they recruit the way they want to. They're at the forefront of NIL. That's all the makings of one of the most powerful head coaches in college football. Fifth one, I'm only going 5 deep here. We had Harbaugh, we had Ryan Day, we had Brian Kelly. Who's going to go in this 5th spot? None of them. I got Jimbo Fisher as the 5th most powerful head coach in college football. There's probably no name in the top 10, if I went that deep, that's seen more of a shift in this category over the past 6 months than Jimbo Fisher, which is weird because he's not new, he's not young, he didn't just get to College Station, but yet a lot of things, I think in terms of public perception, have changed about Jimbo as of late. I mean, that guy has really taken it to another level. Ultimately, that only matters if he backs it up and his team backs it up on a football field on Saturdays in the fall. I think we all understand that. But Texas A&M, the thing about them, it's very appropriate there in the state of Texas because Texas A&M has always been college football's version of Big Oil. It's just that they haven't had their John D. Rockefeller come in and capitalize on it. But now people start to stink and they say, well, maybe they have. Maybe Jimbo is that guy. Do you see what we're doing in recruiting? Do you see what we're doing in NIL? And here's the most important part for a lot of folks in Texas around this program. When folks came after us, when Nick Saban came after us, did we do what we've seen other programs and coaches do? Did we tuck tail and run? No, our guy pulled out his sword and said, come on. And he started swinging it wildly, verbally, of course. And that appealed, as you would imagine it did, to the base, to the fan base out there in and around Texas A&M. Well, you say all that, and then you also need to understand that people inside the sport have looked at Texas A&M for a long time and said, I hope they never get it figured out. Because if Texas A&M ever gets it figured out, that's going to be a nightmare to deal with. Because folks who have been there or folks who know the program, they know the resources are limitless. They have been for a long time. They know that it's like a launching pad, and it's just that for some reason, no one's ever put the right guy in the rocket ship out there. So they've never really been able to blast off. Well, I know that right now, a lot of you, partially out of a defense mechanism in your own mind, look at Jimbo and look at A&M and say, oh, they'll never be better than 8-4. Yeah, they will be. I promise you they will be. Now, is it going to be 12-0? Is it going to be SEC championships, playoff appearances? I don't know that. I have no clue. No one does. But there's a lot of skill. While there may not be skill in that, there's a lot of skill in using your common sense and looking at the talent they're acquiring and thinking 8-4s are probably going to be in the rearview mirror. In the future, the difference in good versus great at Texas A&M is going to be 12-0 versus 10-2. That's the rarefied air they're about to ascend to. And Jimbo Fisher, much like the other 5 guys on this list, when he talks now, there are a few truths in this uncertain world, but one of them is you will for sure shut your mouth and pay attention when Jimbo Fisher talks from now on. Some people may even proactively not mention him so as to avoid the kind of thing that we saw in the last month. Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, Jimbo Fisher, those, as of this moment in time, are my 5 most powerful head coaches in college football.